I have a question. How much can this button affect the way your team play and perform? Today we're going to find out, and we're going to use one of the buttons that never gets pressed. That's right, folks. Today we're going to look at mentality, and I'm convinced that no one has ever used that very defensive button. If you have, drop it in the comments. What is your success rate like? But today we're going to explore it. So what is very defensive? The aim of this mentality is to frustrate, reduce space, and slow things down, and keeping the ball. So you're going to look at possession, if possible, wasting time. And unlike defensive mentality, you're not looking to score. You're just basically looking to shut up shop. So I guess in the presets, you'd expect it to be park the bus, right? So if we put park the bus in, you can see even that doesn't go for very defensive. It just goes for plain defensive. I'm telling you, this button hardly ever gets used until today. So we've got a defensive team instruction layout there. I don't like that at all. I've never had success with it. My question to you is, what would happen if you used very defensive mentality, but with attacking team instructions and an attacking layout? To try this theory, I went over to Liverpool randomly. I've slotted in one of my old 4-2-4s. I haven't used this since the early days of FM. It worked then, super aggressive. You can see fullbacks on attack, inside forwards. It's a pretty standard 4-2-4. Now we've slotted in very defensive mentality, and as you can see, it hasn't affected team performance at all, really, apart from a little glitch around Christmas time. We're sitting top of the league. We've only lost one match, and that was away at Man City. And you might think we haven't scored as many goals, but in 21 matches, we are the top scorers in the league with 51, conceding 14. So my question is, has it really affected anything? Or is it just the fact that Liverpool are just that good? So now we go over to League 2 and my local team, Carlisle United, who also happen to have the greatest away kit in history. So I'm going to load in the same tactic that I used at Liverpool, 4-2-4 ultra high press. In it goes, there you see it. Mentality is originally balanced, but we'll just knock that up to very defensive. In fact, first of all, because it's such an attacking formation, let's bang it on attacking and see how it does for a season. So I simulated through that season with the 4-2-4, really attacking mentality. And what happened was they won the league. 102 points, only losing 6 times. Have a look at it a bit closer. They scored 118, so it's a goal machine. They also conceded 51 though, which is over a goal per match. But at that level, it's not too bad. As you can see, looking down the table there, pretty much every team's conceded more than a goal a match. So we know that tactic is super solid. Made it ages ago. I haven't even used it much. Maybe I should revisit it looking at the success rate. But my question to you is, how's it going to look if the only thing we change is that? If you look under the hood at the attacking players, now we've got very defensive mentality. Their mentality themselves switches to balanced. If we flip this back to attacking, you can see their mentality is attacking. So it does have an effect on the mentality of your attacking players. If you look at the fullbacks on attack, his mentality is very attacking with the attacking mentality. So he's going to bomb on all the time. If we flip that over to very defensive, his mentality turns to just positive. So he's still going to be aggressive, which is interesting, just not full throttle. I'm already quite surprised by that. Just by having the fullback with the attack duty, no matter your team mentality, he still remains quite positive. So not changing anything at all other than that mentality. Let's see how Carlisle did in the entire season. So season over for very defensive Carlisle. How did it go? Well, as you can see, they got promoted yet again. They didn't quite get as many points this time, but still promoted using very defensive mentality. Now this is where it gets interesting. Colchester had a storming season, but for us, we only conceded 30 goals. So that's 21 less than we did with the attacking mentality. We didn't score anywhere near as many as you may expect, but they were still pretty lethal. There's the formation that got it done. Mentality throughout the season still got them promoted, and easily. So we're rocking with a plus 51 goal difference on very defensive mentality. It just looks like they were a bit more solid. They were still second top scorers in the league with 81, but only conceding 30 in a league like that is wild. How has it affected things that much? And it makes you think, can we use this a bit more often, especially when we're using aggressive tactics? Let's have a look at some team stats to weigh them up against each other. So what we've got here is the very defensive team. There it is, very defensive, the one that came second. So if we go back to the team overview, first one we'll look at is average possession. You can see we don't feature in that. We're actually 10th with 50%, whereas the attacking mentality, dominated the ball with 58%. I was expecting that to be a bit closer. This one for very defensive is super impressive though. Clean sheets, 25 out of the 46 games on very defensive. There's 25 clean sheets. If we look at the attacking one, They are not in sight. They're not in sight in that. But on the flip side, if you look at chances created, Carlisle was still really good in third place with 158, which is pretty good. But the really attacking one just blasted everyone with 247. So you can see the pros and cons of each. But I still can't help feeling that the very defensive mentality is still a really surprising result for them to finish second and with such a good performance. And remember how it did with Liverpool as well. It makes me think that the duties and the formation you set your team up are going to dictate how successful you are, more so than the mentality perhaps. Look at this game against Newport County. 3-2, 2.78 XG. You would not think you were playing very defensive there, would you? You wouldn't say this was very defensive either, would you? Average position with the ball in that last match, check that out. 26 and 17 are my fullbacks. Without the ball, they're not exactly getting back for an overall position of that. So is the formation dictating how aggressive we actually are? So if I go back to the attacking one and I take the same match, Newport County, last game of the season, you can see while it is really impressive, look at that, 25 shots, 10 on target. Match momentum was pretty much all us. What is interesting is the average positions with the ball. It kind of looks more traditional with your 4-2-4. The fullbacks aren't getting as high up. It looks a bit more normal, should I say, without the ball. Again, back into shape a bit better for an overall position of that. Now that is wild, the difference. Was that just that match? So let's go to a random match at the start of the season when most of the time your team are cooking that bit more. So Gillingham 4-1. There you can see pretty standard stuff for Carlisle to beat Gillingham. We'll go to the analytical data down here. Teams, this is how you get your average positions, by the way, once it's loaded itself in. This will give you an insight into where your players are in the match. Average positions, just Carlisle. And let's go for starting 11, average position with the ball. That is more like what we saw from the very defensive tactic. There you go. So you've got your fullbacks higher up. Still not as aggressive, I'd say. Without the ball, back into their shape nicely for an overall position of that. So how about very defensive? So back to this one, very defensive mentality, schedule, and our first game against Gillingham. We actually lost this one 2-1, even though we dominated the match. We'll go to the data, starting 11, average position with the ball, and it's a bit more ragged, isn't it? And the fullback's getting a bit more forward than the very attacking. Without the ball, they do get back into shape on this occasion for an overall position of that. So maybe that Newport game was just a freak, but it does show that some of the attacking positions in your team, such as these guys, the only two on attack other than strikers, they're probably the most attacking members of your team when your mentality is on very defensive. I'm very aware that I'm not really answering questions here, I'm just creating them, but it gives you something to think about, right? So my thinking is this: if you've got a solid tactic that you are loving, something like this, right? And you're going into each game with it, you can play with your mentality depending on how the match is going, rather than messing around with team instructions or roles and duties. If you're happy with all that, potentially you could start the match out attacking, take the lead, bang it back to very defensive, lock it down. So I don't know, what do you reckon? Is there space to use both tactics, potentially going very defensive in some situations and dropping back to attacking on some? I have more questions than answers. But I am considering doing a save where I've got to use defensive mentality, so this could come in quite handy. It looks like if everything is aggressive in terms of your shape, so we've technically got 4 up front there, and your team instructions, if they remain aggressive, your mentality can be played with. So if you've had a go using very defensive, let me know how you've got on. Have you ever used it with an attacking setup?